Today we're going to be learning how to use basics of InDesign. You guys are going to be using this for a lot, mainly for producing boards when you're giving a presentation, as well as compiling your portfolio. So the files that I gave you are just JPEGs from a completed, or I'm sorry, uncompleted David Chipperfield project. And the reason that I have those in the file is because there's renderings, site plans, and sections and elevations. So it's kind of a complete project. And this isn't what you're doing for this week. I guess you're going to be using InDesign more for a book. But the lessons that we're going to be using here are going to be good for any of that. So basically what I want to start with is creating a new document. So in InDesign, you go to New, Document, or if you're just opening the program, that'll be the first option. And you're going to want to start with basically, it's already got your page size as letter, which you're probably okay with. Some people use different page sizes, but that's all right here. And the interesting thing about InDesign is it starts with picas, or pixels, and if you want to use that as your system of measurement, that's fine. Otherwise, you can just type in 8.5 inches by 11 inches, or whatever you end up wanting to use, and it'll actually convert it for you. So if you want to use the plotter, our plotters are 42 inches wide, so you just type in 42 inches as your width and whatever you want to as your height. You can also change, obviously, the orientation of it, portrait and landscape, and we can set the number of pages as well. So if you know it's going to be a certain number of pages, you start setting the number of pages here. So I don't know, 10 pages. You can add or delete pages later on, so that's not a huge issue. The other thing that you'll notice here is that you have an option to set columns, you can set your gutters, and you can set your margins. I usually use just the standard margins that they have in there, which ends up being, I think, ½ an inch as the margin. And it's not going to actually print the margin, it's just a guide. It's there for you to use. And then the number of columns, if you're going to end up doing something more like a book, you might want to have a set number of columns that you're using, but I just start with one. So then when you hit OK, you bring up your book, and you've got kind of a first page that doesn't have a facing page. That's one of the other options that I forgot to talk about when you're opening a new document, is whether or not you want to have facing pages. And facing pages just means that they're in a pair like this. So these two pages are facing each other. So you guys have been using Photoshop and Illustrator, right? So the layout of InDesign is pretty similar to those. You've still got your toolbar on the left, and you've got all your options across the top here, and then the windows on the right side. The first three windows are really important. So you've got Pages, which controls, obviously, the pages. Layers, which, again, is pretty obvious. It controls your layers, which you're going to end up wanting to use in pretty much every CAD program that you use in your careers. And then Links. And what's different about InDesign when you compare it to Illustrator or Photoshop is that you're actually not using actual image files in InDesign. You're linking the image files to InDesign. So it doesn't actually save it all in this one space. It's saving the link to it. So when you're making an InDesign file, you need to keep all of your actual files that you're using in the same place, because if you move the file from its folder on your computer, then the link will not know where that file exists anymore. Does that make sense, everybody? So if you place something into InDesign, so the way you place an image is to either do Command D or Control D for you PC users, and then, or you can go to File, Place, and essentially just grab one of the images. I'm just going to grab a rendering. And then you can either click it and drag it to be a certain size, or you can just click and it'll give you the actual image size. That's the image at 100%. And you notice that the link came up in the links box because that's the actual image that you're linking to. So right now, the image that we put in is put in inside of a frame. So different from when you place an image in Illustrator or Photoshop, which actually just gives you the object, this gives us a frame with the link of the object inside the frame. So we have two options of how to edit the size of this photo. One option that we have is we can edit the size of the frame, so I can crop out some of the photo if I want to, just by clicking and dragging on one of the corners or on one of the sides. The other option that you can do to change the size of these is to actually change what's inside the frame. So to do that, you either click on this little donut button in the middle, and that gives you an orange frame that'll pop up, and that orange frame is actually the image itself, the edges of the image. So you can click and drag and move it around within the frame, or you can resize it within the frame as well. Now this is really useful because if otherwise you'd basically have to set your crop in Photoshop or in Illustrator, but this way you can just keep the entire image. You don't have to worry about cropping it until you actually bring it in InDesign, and that's what's really powerful about frames. So the other way that you can immediately edit what's inside the frame is this other selection tool. It's the direct select. So that is another one. You don't have to press the button to get into the frame. It's actually already only selecting this one. Let's see here. Another thing about frames that you can use is it's called fitting. So right now you notice that my image doesn't take up the entire frame. So say I have a frame that I know how big the frame I want. I know how big I want my frame to be, but I have an image that doesn't quite fill it. So what I can do is put the image into the frame, and then I'm going to give you guys hotkeys when I know them, or I'll show you how to get to it without using a hotkey as well. So the hotkey for this one, in the first one, it's going to fitting. So if you right click and go to fitting, all of these options are here for you. So you can either center your content, fit your content to the frame, which basically just means that the exact edges of the frame is the exact edges of the image, so it'll stretch your image. And then frame to content means that the frame will be stretched to the edge of the image that's inside the frame. But the better ones are fit content proportionally and fill frame proportionally. So basically what these do is if you fit your content proportionally, then the largest edge of the content will go to the edge of the frame. Fill frame proportionally means that the frame will be full of your image, but it'll still keep its proportional constraints. So if you click that, or in this one, it's kind of a really long hotkey. It's like Command Option Alt C, is that right? Shift. That's what that one is. Okay, Command Option Shift C to fill frame proportionally, and that's what you get, is that it actually completely fills the frame. It also centers your content, so if you don't want the content centered, you can move it afterward, but it'll be actually filling the entire frame. There's also keys that are on the top when you're selecting a frame. Those same keys are also in these little tiny buttons up at the top of your program. So that's frames and fitting. Let's see here. I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to go to place, so Command D, and I'm going to select multiple items to place. And what I want to do this time is select, let's just say, all of the plan images. I don't know if they're going to come out in order if I do this, but that's okay, because we can move things around later. So what you notice now is that you have a little box basically that's going to have a number that I can't actually read right now, but it has a number of how many images are left in your place list. So what you can do is click and drag your first one, to a certain size, and then you can match that by sort of getting close to the edge, and then you'll notice that once you're actually exactly matching it, it gives you quick guides that give you the dimensions. These little green arrows are basically saying this is exactly the same size as the last one you placed. So it's a really useful thing in InDesign. There's a lot of quick guides that help you keep things organized, essentially. So if you know that the images you're placing are all the same size, or if you know that the frames, at least, you want to have them be the same size, then that's the easiest way to get that done. So I'm just going to place all of these at the same size. And you notice that they're not all lined up right now, and that's okay. We can realign them in a minute. Okay, so now that they're all placed, these ones are all actually aligned already, but one of the things that you're going to want to do is a lot actually is use the alignment tools, and those are all in that same little top area, but they're also in, if you go to Window and go to Object and Layout, it's aligned right in there. Another thing that you guys can do is you can customize your workspace. The way it's set up initially is to have a pretty limited number of windows on this right-hand side, but I really like to use either advanced or typography and then add what I need to after that. So I'm just going to start with advanced because I know that that's got a couple more options. Still doesn't have a line though, unfortunately. So I'm going to go to Object and Layout and click on Align, and then the Align window pops up, and then I can just drag that over and add it to my window toolbar, so that whenever I need to, it's already right there. So those are already aligned. These ones I'm going to align by selecting all of them. So click and drag to select and then align them. These ones also have some spacing between them. So I'm just going to drag the bottom one up so that it's aligned with the bottom of the other side. And you notice that there's some guides that are telling me that what I'm doing is actually aligning them. Those are those green lines across the bottom. So once those are aligned, I can also set it up so that these are all evenly distributed because the third one is not aligned correctly. So you can do that by either distributing the spacing or by distributing the center. What's nice about InDesign is if you want to have an even spacing between your objects, it's really easy to do that by either setting the spacing as a certain length or a distance, or by setting where the first and last image in your sequence are, and then using that distribute spacing option. The reason that's more powerful than, say, Illustrator is that in Illustrator, typically your options are to distribute based on the top, center, or bottom, or left, center, or right of your image. And if you have images that aren't the same size, then your spacing between the images gets kind of out of whack. So yeah, that's distributing. Sure. It's under Window. So when you can't find something, one of the best places to look is under Window, and then go into these little pull-out menus. But yeah, Window, Object, Align. Yeah. Am I going too fast for anybody? You guys are all having an easy time? Okay, good. Let's see here. Oh, one of the things that I wanted to talk about that I forgot actually is when I was talking about frames, one of the things that you can do is set up a frame before you actually have something to put in it. So if you know that you have a rendering that you want to take up, the full page, you can set that up by clicking on this rectangle frame tool, and then clicking and dragging the size of the frame that you want to place an image into. That way, when you actually go to place your image, you can just do your Command D to place the image. PCs, again, are Control D. And then I'm going to grab a rendering. And it's already automatically saying that it's going to replace the item, but if it doesn't do that for you, then when you have the actual item to place, you just click on the frame and it places it into the frame for you. This image is kind of small, so it didn't actually fill the frame, but if you remember the hotkey from before, Command-Shift-Option-C makes it take up that entire frame. Again, if you didn't remember that one, that's from fitting, which is if you right-click on the image, fitting, and then fill your frame proportionally. Another option that you can use is when you're placing an object, you can place it into a frame that already has an object in it. You can overwrite that item. And the way you do that is you hover over it, and you notice that the black arrow in the top left of the box turns white. And once it's white, you just press Alt or Option and click, and it overwrites the image that's in there already. So that can be useful if you're trying to decide, certain renderings that you want to put somewhere. If you know the frame should stay the same, but you want to try different images out, that can be pretty helpful. Another thing that's great about placing is that when you're placing, if you place something and it's in the wrong spot, or if you hit the place command and it automatically places it somewhere that you don't want it to be, if you hit Command Z or Control Z, it just pulls it back out for you so that you still have that option to place it somewhere else. So it's another good thing about placing. Okay, so one of the things you guys are going to have to use when you're doing your portfolios and when you're doing boards is text and text editing. So for a portfolio, it can be nice to have all of your text in the same place. So you're going to want to create a master sheet that will basically say, like, this is the layout of the typical text for your actual portfolio. So you can set up a master sheet in Pages. If you hit your Pages tab and then go to the first one that they give you is a master, which we can just use that, that's fine. So I typically have text in the top left. It's just an easy place to have it. And you might want to have several different boxes here. So basically, you can think about laying out your portfolio as having maybe your title block of text, and then a subtitle, and then the actual body of the text after that. And I'm not going to actually edit these in the master page because right now it's just giving me an indication for where my text will go in my actual pages. So if you're in master and then you double click outside of it, then you notice that those text boxes are actually still existing within the other pages. You just don't have the ability to edit them outside of that. You have to add another text box over it. But the reason that you would add that text box initially is just so you can get the layout to be exactly the same on all of your pages. Another thing that you're going to want to end up using probably if you are setting up a portfolio is something called paragraph styles. And what that lets you do is easily keep track of what font each separate thing is, or what font size, what style, all of that. So if your title block is a different font or a different size than your body of your text, which it probably should be, you can have that automatically set up. So that's in the Windows, again, paragraph styles. And basically what you do is just create a new style, and once you double click on it, you can change the name of the style to, say, title block. And then you can change, basic stuff for your character formats, There's some advanced options if you really need to scale the font. Incidence and spacing. So basically, there's just a ton of options in here that a lot of them you're not going to necessarily need to use all the time, but one of them you're probably going to want to use is hyphenation. InDesign automatically has everything set up so that it'll hyphenate once it gets to the end of the frame that your text is in, and that can be really frustrating and annoying. So I usually just click hyphenation off, and that way it'll just go to the next line instead of hyphenating your text. So for the title block, I want my basic character to be, I really like Orator as a font right now, so I'm going to go with Orator. And then since it's a book, you don't necessarily need to have a huge font for your titles. Something around 20 or 24 is probably fine. I'm going to stick with 24 for right now, and then just hit OK. So if this is my title block, that's the paragraph style that I'm using, then when I edit it, it should already be Orator. So this project is the Nobel Center for Stockholm. That's the name of the project, and my name in this case is David Chipperfield. Now, the subheading here, I didn't actually set a paragraph style for, so I can set one now, and in setting it, it should change it for me. I don't want to use that. I'm just going to use Orator again, but have it be a smaller font size than that one. So Orator, and we can stick with 12. I'm going to turn off my hyphenation. And there it goes. So now that's the second paragraph style that I created. I forgot to title it though, so subtitle. Okay. And the great thing about this is that if you have these paragraphs set up, paragraph styles set up, I should say, if you want to use this later, but you want to change the font size, anything about the font in a specific paragraph style, you just change the style, and then anything that's attributed to that paragraph style will also change. So similar to the way that you can just change the links very easily in this, you can also change paragraph styles and edit everything at once. Okay, so that's a little bit about styles. I guess another thing, I know that you guys have probably heard a little bit about hierarchy already, but this is where I was going to open the other file that I had in the package. So I had an InDesign file called tutorial, and that's a layout for what you might have for a final board. And if you guys want to open that and just take a look at it, you can move things around if you want. And essentially, it's just giving an example of, I mean, this is a very quick thing that I put together, but of how you can use hierarchy when you're setting up a layout. So obviously in this, the biggest things are the renderings. So this is the main rendering that I want people to see and say, oh wow, this building is going to be so awesome. So you want them to notice the things that are going to be the biggest, or you can just essentially say that they're going to notice the things that are the biggest and the darkest. So this is like the most obvious thing on the page. It's also important to have, when you're setting up a layout, to have some white space. You don't want to overwhelm people with things that are overlapping or bumping up right next to each other. So I want to have information in there that people will be able to get some context from. So I have these site plans that are zooming in as you go. And I also have created some labels for all of the drawings. It's important to, especially for people that are in the field, to have these kind of labels as well as a scale to the labels. These are all scaled in metric, so you're not going to have 1 to 10,000 it'll be something like 1 to 1/128th of an inch, something like that. I don't know exactly the scale because I don't use metric system. But it's good to have those in there, and it's good to be able to clearly relate what the title is to what the actual image is. And I also labeled the group saying these are the site plans and have them set up so that they're spaced evenly and sort of a little bit larger than the plans and sections, but that's only because actually in this case the plans and sections are the smallest images that I downloaded for this project. So in your actual projects, you probably won't want to have your plans and sections be so small because you want them to be more important, basically. If you're giving them less real estate, then people will know that they're not as important to you. And that can be bad, especially in your final presentations for architecture. So in this layout, the most important things are all the giant rendering images, but you guys can set up your own layouts when you actually get to that point. Let's see here. So then I guess the final thing that I wanted to talk to you guys about is exporting a document to a PDF. So once you've got this all set up, or say you want to, get a test print of what you've done so far, you don't want to print straight from InDesign really ever. It's kind of clunky and takes a long time, and it slows the printers down. So what you want to do is export it to a PDF first and print the PDF. So File, Export, and then you call it whatever you want to call it. This is Chipperfield. And then once you hit save, it'll give you a bunch of options. Basically, you want it to be a high quality print. You can use the typical settings if you find that some of your images are really large. Right now I'm just using JPEGs, and JPEGs are actually very small file sizes, so I don't need to do extra compression. But some of you might need to use this compression to downsample your images, especially if you're using an image that has layers. And actually, just quickly talking about that, if you have an image that has layers, it's better to save the image as a flattened version of itself and link to that than to link to the image that has layers, because the image that has layers will be just so much larger and slow down your InDesign file and slow down the final print as well. Because every time you print something that has the layer options on it, the printer will look at each pixel from each layer so that it knows what to actually print. So it goes exponentially longer when you're using layers. So flattening your images is a good idea. Also, if your images are huge, you can still use their downsampling. And basically what this does is just takes your pixels. If you have an image that's above 450 pixels per inch, or PPI, it downsamples it to 300. You can set these however you want. I think the Printer Lab plotter machine, is that like 300 or is it 250?
I think it actually goes 600.
Oh, seriously? Oh, wow. I did not know that.
You don't really notice
Much above 300, yeah, exactly. So when you're printing 300, if you're doing something for the web, it's actually somewhere around 100. I usually use 150 just to be safe for people who have large monitors. And then, but past that, you don't really have to worry about downsampling. If, like right now, I only have JPEGs linked, so that's okay. Then you hit export, and you've got a PDF waiting for you wherever you saved the PDF. Do you know where I saved it to? I'm going to do another one because I don't remember where I put that. Let's see here. Okay, so export. And then in your file that you saved it, you'll have a PDF. Oh, good. Okay. I think it just needs to. There we go. Yeah, so then you have a PDF version of what you were just working on in InDesign. You notice in the PDF that all of the guides that were in there are gone. So even the guides that are around these are all gone. And that basically just is good because those are just supposed to be an indicator for you to help you keep out of the margins. Another way that you can view your PDF or view your InDesign file as though it were ready to print that I find really useful is overprint preview. So if you're looking at it and you don't want to export it yet, but you want to see what it would look like when it's printed, overprint preview is nice because it basically makes everything the final quality. It means that it will also, if you have a lot of large files linked, it'll really slow down your computer. So you don't necessarily want to leave it on overprint preview. But if you look at the quality of this rendering here, when I go from overprint preview to turning it off, it's really fuzzy when overprint preview is not on because it's really just showing you what it would look like in the space. Overprint preview will give you what it looks like at its full quality when it's exported. So if something's fuzzy, don't freak out about it. It's probably just not on overprint preview.
Another nice way to get a kind of sense of your page is to hit Shift W. That brings up kind of the overprint preview, but in presentation mode.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So presentation mode you can get to by view screen mode and going to presentation, or like Elliot just said, the hotkey is Shift W, and that blacks out everything except for what's actually on the page, and then you get a nice final view at it. Another thing that's interesting about InDesign is that if you have something that you want to go on a page but you don't necessarily know where you want it to go on the page, you can just have it like hanging out in the wings, and it'll be linked to the file, but it won't actually go to your PDF when you export it. And sometimes I do that when I'm trying to figure out where I want to arrange things. But going back to the overprint, or not the overprint preview, but the presentation mode, that won't show up then in the outside of this page outline. So essentially that's really it. That's what I had for the basics of InDesign. Does anybody have any questions at this point? Go ahead. So I actually, are you saying like when you draw frames? Yeah. Okay, so when you hit the frame button, it automatically gives you the crosshair. You're still getting, sorry, what did you say for the copy? I can't hear what you're saying. Oh, for the text tools? Actually, I don't know. I've never played with getting crosshairs for that before, but I do know that when you draw it, that's when the crosshairs show up, is after you click to drag. The other thing that, if you're worried about precision, InDesign is an incredibly precise tool. So once you've actually drawn the box, editing it to be in the exact right place is probably the easier way to get it, accurately set. Otherwise, when you're inputting the box, or once you have the box drawn, you can also set it up so that you have the exact placement and the exact width or height. Another great thing about having the text boxes in there is once you have them set, say you have a text box that you want to have a specific relationship to an image, you can create a group the same way that you would in Illustrator. And you can do that by Command G, or I think it's Control G for a PC. So this is a group right now. So when I move the image, the tag moves with the image. And then you can edit it by double-clicking into the group or by ungrouping it, which is right-click and then ungroup.
Is there a way, like, if you wanted those three to be evenly spaced from edge to edge
Yep.
without typing in the number?
Yep. So the easiest way to do that would be to have one set on one edge, and then click and drag the other one to the other edge. Once it's aligned, you select all three. Oh, I selected that. Okay, you select all three. And then in your line tab, I would just do distribute spacing, because that's keeping the in-between spaces equal. And that's how you do that. So it's pretty simple. And it's also good for when you have images that are not the same width or the same height, because that'll keep that even spacing between.
Can you talk about InDesign as a tool for collaboration and packaging?
No. I honestly have never used InDesign collaboratively. I'm not totally sure how to use packaging. No, sorry, Molly.
No, it's okay.
But now that you say that, I'm going to go look that up. Yeah, go ahead.
So, if you can imagine when you're collaborating on different projects, a lot of times people are inputting different images or drawings into an InDesign document for maybe a proposal or a competition entry or something like that. So, oftentimes it's the InDesign document that's collecting a lot of different pieces. And in order for everyone to kind of see your...
Oh, okay, sorry. Yep, keep going. No. Totally.
Yeah, you do it. You do it.
No,
this is
no.
your tutorial. I
No.
don't want to hijack it.
No, it's okay. I mean, essentially packaging is the way to save your file and all your links and all your fonts into one place, so that if somebody else wants to open the InDesign file, they can actually see it exactly the same way that you do. If you save the InDesign file and send somebody the InDesign file just as itself, then they won't be able to use it. It'll just be a blank document with a bunch of empty links. It won't be able to be edited or anything. You can't even print it from there. So when you want to share your InDesign file with somebody, you go to Package, and then it gives you a summary of everything that you have linked in the file. So even, Orator isn't a typical font that you find on the computer, so they'll link the font OTF file along with your... If it's not protected. Good call. This is not protected. It's a free font, so it's not protected. And then it gives you a link list, so all of the links are there. None of them are missing, so that's good. And then essentially what you do is you just give it a package. It'll want you to save it first, so... And then it'll give you the option to create the file name for it, and then make a folder for all of the links and text images, or all of your files for this InDesign file will go into the folder that you create. So I'm going to package it. This is basically just saying what Elliot said about the fonts, that if you have a font that's protected, it won't let you package that font. And then it is done there. So then if I go to the package that I just created, it has the InDesign file, all my links, so all my images are in links, and then document fonts, Orator's in there. The reason that you guys were able to open my InDesign file that I created is that I just gave you the file that the InDesign file was in, along with all the links that were already in it. Because it was all in one file, it was able to say, oh, well, I know where all of those links are. They're right next to the document. But if I had just given you this file without any of the images, it would just be a blank file. It would be useless. So keep that in mind when you are sharing. Was that what you meant by packaging? Is there anything? Okay, awesome.
So now if you sent tutorial 2 without the tutorial 2 folder,
Yep.
it'd be fine.
Actually, so it kind of depends. I mean, if I sent this to you guys, no, it wouldn't be fine. You have all the images and links and fonts already, but the links are in a different place. So if you put tutorial 2 next to a file that had, that was called links, that had all of the images in it, then it would be fine.
Right.
but if it's not exactly the same path, it won't know where the files are. You can relink it. So say I lost this file or put it somewhere else, like in the trash. When I open it, oh, that didn't work right. That's not what I wanted. Okay, well, it should say, this is probably because I already have all those other links open right now, but it should say, I don't really know where the links are. So I'm going to, I want to show you guys what it's like to have the bad link. So I'm going to delete all of this stuff. And see if that makes it work. Don't save. Okay, so now it'll say this is exactly what it would give you if you didn't package it. It would say this document contains 22 links that are missing, and it still has the image there. But if you try to edit it or if you try to print it, it won't be able to because it's just the link to the image. It's not the actual image itself. And you've got little red question marks next to all of your actual links. So that's basically why you don't want to just give someone the InDesign file. I just hit undo, and so now all of the links are back. If I wanted to relink this to say, this is where all the links are, I can go to this file, select one of the links, which this is rendering 1. So if I find rendering 1 and relink it, then it'll look for all of the other links that are missing in that file. So if it relinks that one, it says, I searched this directory and found and relinked all of the other missing links because they were all happened to be in the same file. So that's the way you would correct that error, basically. The other great thing about InDesign is your ability to edit a photo. So say I like this placement, but I'm still not done with this rendering because of something's not right about it. Then what I can do is I can right-click it, and I can say Edit With, and I can choose to edit the original with another program. So if I do that and open it in Photoshop, and let's say the only change that I want to make is I want to add a blur to it. I want to make it have a depth of field blur, even though this isn't really the best image to show depth of field in because there's mostly background and midground. I'm going to add that anyway. Let's see here. So I'm going to do a tilt shift blur. Whoa. Okay. So that's done. It's blurred. And I'm just going to save over the file because if you're just using, the file to link to InDesign and you have it saved somewhere else, you can just edit this one and do whatever you want to it. So I'm going to save it, save over the JPEG, and then going back to InDesign, you notice that it automatically updated, and now there's an actual blur as well in that file. If it doesn't automatically update, it'll have a little status button next to the link, and it usually is this little yellow yield sign with an exclamation point, and you just double click that and it'll ask you if you want to update the link, and you just update it. Any other questions? I think you had your hand up earlier, did you?
Yeah, I was wondering, I know how to change the size of the frame and the picture. Is there any way to change them both simultaneously?
No.
Okay.
Not in InDesign. But essentially and the reason for that is that it's specifically a frame and an object. So they're two separate items to InDesign. So you can't edit them simultaneously. You can scale it, I guess. Is that what you were going to say? Oh, really? Control Alt does that? I was going to say you can do an object scale, where you would basically do a transform to change the size of it, and that's one way of doing it. I guess if you already have your scales set and you want everything to stay the same, you could select a bunch of things or just one thing and scale that down. And then I'm going to hit the preview so you guys can see what that's doing, and that scales, all of it together. But what were you saying? I'm sorry.
You hold Control and Alt and then grab one of the nodes, or
Oh,
Control Shift will scale it.
that's awesome. Okay, cool. New things. So you can. I didn't know that you could, but you can. That's awesome. Okay, great. Any other questions, guys? If I'm ever going to be arranging multiple images on one page or on a lot of pages, I'm definitely going to be using InDesign, because for me, Illustrator is a powerful tool for vector images. So if I'm doing something that's like diagrammatic or something like that, where I want just vectors, I'll use Illustrator. But for actually arranging things on a page, InDesign is a lot more powerful, basically. It can let you do things that Illustrator can't. So if I'm ever doing that, I would choose InDesign.
Anything I print, whether it's to a PDF or
Yep.
paper, I use InDesign.
Yep. Illustrator is great, and it's great for, I think, creating images. So if you have something that is not a vector that you want to be a vector image, or editing something within it, using line work. If you want to edit, say, a DWG file that you exported and want to change the line work of it, Illustrator is great. InDesign can use some of the same line tools that Illustrator can, but it's actually not as powerful for editing line work as Illustrator is. So I would say that's the main difference that I would use Illustrator for over InDesign.
And I like text, how text works in InDesign best.
Me too.
So if I'm going to have a few different images, but there's going to be text there, then I'll just dump all of everything into InDesign.
Yeah, same. I have not used it to create an interactive file, but I actually was looking at how to do that last night. So let's see here. I think it was in Window. So basically, you can use any of these links. The basic ones are like hyperlinks. So like in a PDF, if you have something that's linked to a website, you can create a hyperlink so that somebody can just click it and it'll go to the website. So that's an interactive PDF right there. But one of the cooler ones, I think, is animations. I'm not totally sure how to use it, but I know that this is where you start. So in Window, interactive, animation. The more obvious one is hyperlinks. I'm not even really sure what liquid layout means, but this is, I think, new to CC, so I'm not familiar with it. One of the great things, though, about learning any software is that if you say to yourself, I wish I could do this with this software, then you can just look up online, how do I add an animation to an InDesign file? And somebody probably knows how to do it and has written either a tutorial or a YouTube video or something on a forum that'll say how to do it. And I think those ways of learning programs actually stick with you a lot more than doing a tutorial for the overall program, because you're actually using it and then learning along with using it. Also, if you have questions about what you're doing, a lot of your classmates, either in your guys' grade or in the grades above you, are going to have a wealth of knowledge of how to do something. So if you have a question about how to do something in InDesign or Illustrator or Photoshop, just ask somebody, and they'll probably either know how to do it, or they'll say, I know somebody who knows how to do that.
Do you have time to show people how to make grids in the file?
How to make grids?
Grids.
Okay. So it's not something that I typically use,
Okay.
but basically you're saying that if you add the columns or bleed and slug grids, like I don't exactly know what you mean by that.
Basically, you create your document and you go to layout and then say grids.
Oh, okay. So what you're saying is
Create your
grids, right? So having this type of gridded layout for it.
yeah, you go to
Margins and columns.
and you can tell your page gets split by how many columns you want.
Okay. Yeah. Like I said, I don't typically use this, but basically, if you're doing a book layout or a poster layout, that might be really helpful to have a set number of columns. You can change the width of the gutter between the columns. And then, again, this is for margins at the top and bottom and at the sides.
So that does the margins. If you go back up to layout, then go to create guides.
Create guides. So then you can set up like horizontal guides. Yeah,
Horizontal grids.
sure.
And you can fit them to the margin or to the page.
Hmm. Actually, I think that I use grids more in Photoshop than I do in this because Photoshop doesn't have an easy snap.
Yeah.
The snaps and smart guides in InDesign are so powerful that I rarely would use that, but I can see why it would definitely be helpful. Another thing that's helpful key for, I think it's in Illustrator, Photoshop, and InDesign is the same hotkey, is Command apostrophe or Control apostrophe. It turns off this grid that is underlying the whole file, and you can set it so that it can snap to the grid, or that it's just a grid to give you kind of a visual aid. Any other questions, guys?
Awesome. Thank you so
Great.
much.
Thanks, guys.